You have exactly 3 seconds to like and subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, I'll appear in your dreams tonight. To ask for a donation for that cup of coffee, link below.
What comes to mind when you think of nuclear energy? If you're familiar with nuclear submarines or nuclear aircraft carriers, then you're definitely a true weapons enthusiast. Unlike submarines that run on conventional fuels and have to surface frequently for refueling, nuclear submarines can operate for decades at high speeds underwater. According to design drawings and expert calculations, the new version of the Ohio-class submarine will be able to operate continuously for about half a century, while the USS Nautilus, which entered service in 1940, requires nuclear fuel refueling every 2 years. The advantages of nuclear energy are obvious. So why haven't they built aircraft powered by highly enriched nuclear energy that can operate for longer periods? Many of you will immediately think of the harmful effects of radiation, because primary nuclear energy often randomly releases harmful radiation, although the fission process releases radiation in a nuclear reactor. If safety measures are not ensured, the radiation could be released into the environment, leading to serious effects on humans. But you might be surprised to learn that the primary reason wasn't pilot safety at all. The most difficult part was creating a nuclear engine light enough to fit into the new aircraft. The next challenge was how to protect the pilots from the dangerous radiation emanating from the nuclear engines behind them in the aircraft. But that doesn't mean that during the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union didn't consider this question and planned to develop nuclear aircraft. As the threat of nuclear war intensified in the middle of the last century, American engineers had some incredibly bold plans. That involved creating a nuclear-powered aircraft and re-employing retired, elderly pilots. Believing they would die of natural causes before radiation had a serious enough effect to cause them to develop cancer. The person who proposed this inhumane project was none other than Enrico Fermi, the father of the nuclear age. In 1942, while working on the Manhattan Project, which resulted in the dropping of 2 atomic bombs on Japan, Fermi conceived the idea of flights powered by enriched nuclear fuel rods. When World War II ended, the United States began implementing its plan to create nuclear aircraft. 61. Teams of engineers and strategists created a series of design blueprints to turn the idea into reality. As you may already know, the advantages of using nuclear-powered aircraft are no different from those of nuclear submarines. In 1945, the War Department, Department of Defense, stated, with radioactive aircraft, supersonic flights around the world will become a reality. A top-secret document from the Atomic Energy Commission, now stored at the Eisenhower Presidential Library, states that nuclear energy could allow aircraft to fly one or several orbits around the Earth before having to land to replace the fuel rods inside the aircraft engine's reactor. With nuclear-powered aircraft, they only need to stop for rest because the pilots are tired and exhausted after long hours of strenuous flying. The aircraft doesn't have to worry about refueling. Indeed, during the Cold War, refueling aircraft was also a concern for the major powers. Bomber planes consume a lot of fuel just to fly to their target location. And after completing their mission, they have very little fuel left, just enough to fly back. Aerial refueling is a solution, but it's not as great as many people think, especially when refueling while flying over another country. Air defense systems would immediately put those aircraft in their sights, and both aircraft refueling each other would have to get out of the sight of fighter jets and ground-based air defense systems. The aerial refueling attempt was unsuccessful and may even jeopardize the original mission. To minimize the risk of having to refuel at high altitudes, the US has had to buy or lease entire air base systems around the world. These bases were often very close to what was then Soviet territory, allowing the aircraft to have the shortest possible flight distance before reaching their targets. However, this method is expensive. There was a time when the United States was willing to spend $100 million in pure gold to buy Greenland from Denmark in order to build a US military base. Can you calculate how much 100 million USD is in Vietnamese currency? This was clearly a considerable sum, but surprisingly, with their cool heads, ultimately rejected this lucrative offer, as you all know, just one nuclear-powered airplane would solve all the problems related to flight limitations for humankind. But that doesn't mean they don't have drawbacks that cause engineers to take headache medication every night. First, in order to fly, the nuclear reactor on an aircraft must be much smaller than the reactor in a submarine, and to operate efficiently, it must generate much more heat energy than normal. Overheating could cause the reactor to melt, which could then spread to the entire aircraft. Single accident could turn a nuclear aircraft into a giant, radioactive lump of molten metal, crashing to the Earth's surface. The second problem is how to protect pilots from the dangerous radiation from nuclear reactors. While it might be possible to enclose the reactor in a thick concrete wall around a ground-based nuclear power plant or a nuclear engine on a submarine, this is impossible on an airplane. Very thick lead shields would accomplish that. But this would mean the aircraft would be significantly heavier, which is very feasible for fighter jets that need to be as lightweight as possible to ensure agility and maneuverability. Engineers hypothesize that, without fuel tanks like conventional aircraft, that weight could be transferred to nuclear radiation shields. The US spent 16 years trying to realize this hypothesis, but without success. The Soviet Union also struggled to resolve similar issues. Furthermore, because the quality of nuclear materials produced by many countries at that time was inconsistent, it was difficult to effectively control the reaction process. There are so many challenges, and you're probably thinking, how could anyone possibly build a nuclear-powered airplane under these conditions? However, in 1958, an article in Aviation Week claimed that the Soviet Union was testing its first nuclear aircraft. But President Eisenhower quickly and calmly stated that the article was inaccurate, simply for reasons of national prestige. Why do I say that? An engineer who later worked on the Soviet Union's nuclear aircraft program said, "If we had a working aircraft like that, why wouldn't we show off our achievement to the whole world instead of keeping it a secret?" That sounds reasonable. But I think that newspaper was right. Because the fact that a Tu-95L strategic bomber was upgraded and fitted with nuclear-powered engines by the Soviet Union in the spring of 1961 could not be concealed from the eyes lurking beneath the Kremlin. From May to August 19th, the nuclear-powered Tu-95L underwent a total of 34 test flights, involving a crew of pilots. The test results showed that the aircraft's performance exceeded expectations. But many technical issues remained, such as its excessive weight, less ideal continuous flight capability, and especially how to ensure the pilot's health was not negatively impacted. And, like other experimental aircraft, the nuclear-powered Tu-95 LAL was put into storage until the early 1970s when it was transferred to the Irkutsk Aviation Engineering Academy. After the nuclear reactor was dismantled, the Tu-95 LAL was used for training purposes. 1. Might think the Soviet Union was the only country conducting such daring experiments. But no, the Americans were even ahead of them. Indeed, the United States had developed a nuclear-powered bomber as early as 1955, in the form of a flight test aircraft called the Convair MB-36 Crusader. This bomber carried a cooled nuclear reactor capable of producing 1 megawatt of electricity, suspended within the aircraft's weapons bay, and could be lowered through the bomb bay door, forming well-concealed and hidden systems between flights. A nuclear-powered bomber could remain airborne for weeks at a time or longer, and reach any target on the planet without needing to land or refuel. Keeping an airplane airborne for weeks at a time might seem insignificant, but don't underestimate it. During the Cold War, specifically from 1968, that is exactly what the United States was doing. At that time, the Americans had 3 nuclear-powered B-52 bombers. Owl Alert, flying over the Atlantic, Mediterranean, and Pacific Oceans near Alaska, with limited logistical support and landings only when the crew felt necessary. In the Uri, a bomber like that was a perfect gamble. But do you know what the projects of these two fierce rivals have in common? That is, no country has been able to overcome the challenge of protecting pilots and optimizing aircraft weight. Furthermore, the development of intercontinental ballistic missiles (ICBMs) in the mid-1950s also rendered the need for nuclear-powered manned flights unnecessary. Essentially, they are ballistic missiles with a range of over 500 kilometers, designed to carry multiple nuclear warheads at once. Due to its long-range firing capability and capacity to carry multiple nuclear warheads, it is often deployed on submarines and land-based bases, which are among the most destructive forces in the event of a full-scale nuclear war. Unlike tactical ballistic missiles with ranges under 300 km, short-range ballistic missiles under 1,000 km, and medium-range ballistic missiles under 5,000 km, intercontinental ballistic missiles have much higher speeds and significantly longer ranges. Their sole mission is to destroy the target. They don't need to return like airplanes, and they don't have pilots to protect them from nuclear radiation. Therefore, it can be said that there are many advantages. According to the thinking of military experts, the nuclear aircraft development project gradually faded away. In the Eisenhower administration cut funding for this program. Nikita Khrushchev, on the other side of the Iron Curtain, also engaged in similar actions. By 1961, both the US and the Soviet Union had abandoned the project to develop this type of aircraft. But the story doesn't end there. In a last-ditch effort to make nuclear-powered aircraft feasible, strategists resorted to a final method using aging pilots. Older pilots will die of natural causes before nuclear radiation takes effect. So there's no need to make airplanes with heavy radiation shielding systems. Even this rational but inhumane approach was not enough to save the nuclear aircraft program. The US government at the time considered the project unnecessary, very dangerous, and extremely costly. As a result, 1960, President Kennedy canceled the program. Since then, the idea of nuclear-powered aircraft has occasionally been proposed, but it has always been met with indifference. Currently, although air forces remain a core force in wars, the presence or absence of nuclear aircraft no longer significantly impacts the dynamics of warfare. But Russia, China, or some other country were to succeed in developing a fighter jet, equipped with a nuclear engine. To what extent do you think the battlefield situation would change? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue following Viet Quang and KTQS on their next exciting journeys. And now, goodbye and see you again.